Welcome to Prime Life. We call it Retirement 2.0. Leave each episode with tips and new ideas to help you navigate retirement in our new age. It's your time. Make it count.
This podcast is for educational purposes only. It is not intended as medical, investment, or financial advice. We do not sponsor or endorse any of the individuals, companies, products, or services featured on this podcast. Any statements or opinions expressed are of the individual who makes them. We hope you enjoy the episode.
Hi, and welcome to another episode of the Prime Life Podcast. I'm Mary Crean, and I'm excited to be here because I have an amazing guest that I'm going to be introducing momentarily. His name is Dr. Alan Lycka. He suffered a near-death experience and sought renewal through the wisdom of human virtues that refocused him on a life of richness, appreciation, joy, and service. He is now a full-time life-changing speaker, acclaimed author, and a transformational leader. All of my favorite things. So without further ado, Dr. Lycka, tell us a little bit about yourself and how you came through this journey.
Mary, it gives me such a pleasure to be here. In fact, when I speak on stage, I tell everybody it's a pleasure to be anywhere, because back in 2003, I was a world-leading cosmetic doctor. I do all the things that you hear about on the news. I was doing liposuction, I was doing lasers, I was doing Botox. And so at the height of my career, we were walking in Disneyland, my wife and I and my youngest daughter. And my wife turned to me and she said, "What's wrong with you, hun?" I said, "What do you mean, what's wrong with me? There's nothing wrong with me." For once in my life, I hadn't said anything wrong. I hadn't done anything wrong. And I hadn't even thunk anything wrong. But my wife, out of concern, said, "What's wrong with you?" I said, "Huh? What do you mean?" She said, "Listen to your foot." I said, "What do you mean, listen to your foot? That's the dumbest thing you ever said." And she said, "Well, listen to it." And my right foot had suddenly and mysteriously developed a right foot drop. And it was flapping on the pavement with each step that was taken. So, you'd hear thump, thump, thump. And she said, "Did you have a stroke?" And I said, "Dear, there's no way I had a stroke. If I had a stroke, I'd be lying on the pavement, muttering something unintelligible." Well, then she said these words. She said, "When you get back, you better get this checked out." Now, Mary, when you say that to your husband in that tone, what do you expect?
I expect immediately I will do that.
And if a husband is smart, he will do that because he knows what's coming otherwise.
So
when I got back, I went to friends that were doctors who sent me to more friends that were sent me to more friends. I probably saw 1,000 doctors by the end of the day. They did CAT scans. They did brain scans. They even did scans. And you know what they showed?
What did they show?
Absolutely nothing. So this befuddled the doctors. And when a doctor's befuddled, he does more tests and more tests and more tests. I think they even invented tests just to do tests back then because everything kept coming back negative. So they finally got together in a powwow and said, "We're going to send you to a world-leading neurologist." Now, a neurologist is the brain guy. He's the guy with all the answers for these complex questions. So I walked in and he said, "You better be sitting down when I tell you this." I said, "Why? I've got a dropped right foot." He said, "No, you don't. You have ALS, Lou Gehrig's disease. Get your affairs in order. You're going to be dead in 6 months." I said, "Is there a way to prove this diagnosis?" He said, "Of course, an autopsy." What a bedside manner. I mean, he had the bedside manner of House on the TV show. And I said, I'm not going to die to prove you wrong. So I slammed out of that office. I slammed the door and I got into my car and I cried for 15 minutes. And somehow I pulled myself home and got to my wife. And I said, this doctor says I'm going to die. And she said, no, you're not. I don't know what you have, but you don't have ALS. You don't have Lou Gehrig's disease. But you know, when this hits you, Mary, you go through the phases of death and dying that were written by Elizabeth Kubler-Ross on her book on death and dying. You go through anger. I was angry at the world. I could bite the head off nails. I could scream at my staff all day. I screamed at my patients. All of them knew something was wrong, but I couldn't tell them because I was dying. And I didn't want them to abandon me. Then you go through bargaining. Oh God, please don't let this happen. I'll do anything if you don't let this happen. But he wasn't listening back then, at least so I thought. Then you go through denial. And denial is you deny anything's wrong. And I denied anything was wrong. I'd work 10, 12 hours a day. I kept on driving myself. But then my right hand became involved, and it couldn't do the things that it used to do. And I was a right-handed surgeon. But Mary, I was smart. I became a left-handed surgeon. And back then, that was almost impossible because the scissors you use, all the instruments we used were invented for a right-handed doctor. So I went to the machine shop at the hospital and said, could you make this in a left-handed copy? Could you do this in a left-handed? They thought I was nuts, but they did everything I wanted to. So I kept on going. But then you go through depression, Mary. Have you ever been depressed?
Oh, absolutely. When, as you mentioned, life challenges, it definitely can weigh you down.
Yeah, I call those the black days where you could stay in bed all day because what does it matter? You're going to die anyhow. You can't eat, you can't sleep, you're not motivated to do anything. I even had a plan to kill myself because ALS is a terrible disease. It withers away your muscles and eventually you can't breathe. It literally chokes you. And I wasn't going to die that way. I'd seen people die from this terrible disease and I wasn't going to die from it. But before I killed myself, I went to my wife and said, dear, what do I have? She said, I don't know. I said, well, what do I do? She said, you probably haven't seen the right doctor yet. I said, that's brilliant. And back then, something new was invented, and you probably have heard about it. It's called the internet. You ever hear of that, Mary? I think Al Gore invented it or something like that. At least so he claims. Okay.
So he claims.
So he claims. But the thing is, the internet was invented. But back then, it was primitive. You had to get on a dial-on connection. That's when you had to put your phone in a cradle, and it would go, Ria, 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 for 15 minutes until it finally connected. And if it did, you could talk to the other side. But you only could get through a language like DOS because it was so primitive. Computers had no ability to do things like Google, Dr. Google or Dr. Apple or any of these search engines do now. So I had friends that were nerds and they took me to the other side and they found a doctor in Colorado Springs, Colorado, Dr. David Martz, who had the same thing that happened to me, but he got worse much more rapidly. And he was on his deathbed within weeks of his diagnosis. Now, he was so well known and so beloved that people from around the world were coming to say goodbye to David. And they looked at David, and one doctor from Texas, Dr. Harvey, came up and said, David, I don't think you have ALS. He said, what do I have? He whispered because that's all he could do. The doctor from Texas says, I think you have chronic Lyme's disease. I think you've been bitten by a tick. And that tick is causing a chronically progressive neurological disease. And he said, if I'm right, I can put you on medications and you'll be better within 2 weeks. And a miracle happened. David was put on medications, and within 2 weeks, he was like Lazarus arising from the dead. Wow. I had heard the story. I knew David was in Colorado Springs, Colorado. So I phoned every hospital in Colorado Springs, and I got in touch with him at the Methodist Hospital. And he talked to me for hours. And he said, "Can you come down and see me?" I said, "When?" He said, "Right now." I said, "David, it's Thanksgiving in Canada." It was the middle of October when we had Thanksgiving, and my wife had invited 50 people over. So I went to her, my hat in my hand, and I said, "Dear, I'm not going to be here for Thanksgiving." She said, "Why? We have all these people coming." She was really incensed. And I said, "Dear, there's a doctor in Colorado Springs that claims he can help me." She did a 180. She said, "Dear, I'm going to pack your bags for you. I'll drive you to the airport. What are you waiting for?"
Nice.
Women. And so I got to the airport. I got on a great flight from Edmonton to Colorado to Denver. But then from Denver, I had to take a rinky-dink puddle jumper to Colorado Springs. Have you ever been on a rinky-dink puddle jumper?
I actually have. It was when I was in Santa Barbara, California to LAX. So it
Yeah.
wasn't that long of a distance, but
Well, it's not a
kind of
long
scary.
distance. This is
It's
15 minutes long, but it's the
yeah.
flight from hell.
I totally get it.
Because at the end of the day, wind comes off the desert and it causes eddies. And that plane will drop 100 feet without warning. And then it'll climb back up and then drop 200 feet without warning. Then it'll climb again and again. And it was like the drop of doom at Disneyland over and over and over again. And everybody on that plane got off green. And I crawled off that plane after that 15-minute flight. And there was David on the tarmac to meet me. See, back then, that was allowed. It wasn't this 9/11 crap that went on and everybody has high security and everybody's paranoid. He was a well-known doctor. He was meeting a well-known doctor. So there he was. And he said, "You don't look so good." I said, "I don't feel so good." He said, "It's probably just an example of what you've been going through." And so we went and talked for hours, and he said some miracle words. He said, "Dr. Lycka, I think history is repeating itself." So he started me on medications, and that's why I'm still here in 2024, 21 years after this, and I'm still thriving. But you know, when you go through something like this, Mary, your life changes. You really can become
Absolutely.
arsenic and mad and keep on going through those stages of death and dying,
Right.
or you can change. And I decided to give back. And one of the things I decided to do was to give back to women, because women in our society are not still as recognized as they should be. So I sponsored a gala event for the YWCA in Edmonton. And we'd honor women in Edmonton. And a wonderful lady by the name of Harriet Tinka applied for one of the awards. And she applied not because she wanted to win the award. She applied because she wanted to meet me, because she had heard about me, and she had a story very similar to mine. What her story was is she was a university student. After being a world-leading model, walking the runways of New York and Milan and all these glamorous places, she got tired and she decided to go back to university to take her second love, which was accounting. And at university, she was kidnapped, stabbed, and left for dead by one of her fellow classmates who was really a psychopath. Now, Harriet was in the hospital recovering because somehow she got there. She doesn't know how she got there, but she did. And she met a wonderful girl by the name of Amanda that was wheeling down the hallway in a wheelchair. Now, she was paralyzed from the waist down. She had lost both of her parents in a car accident. And she looked at Harriet and said, "What's your story?" And Harriet told her story. And she was going through the phases I was, of anger, denial, bargaining, and depression. And she told the girl, and the girl said, "Harriet, you need to be ashamed of yourself. You need to make something of your life." She said, "I'm paralyzed. I'm going to do something with my life. I don't have parents, but I'm going to do something with. Why aren't you?" And that's when Harriet woke up and said, I'm going to meet Dr. Lycka and we're going to write a book. And we wrote a book together called The Secrets to Living a Fantastic Life. It's become a bestseller on Amazon. And in that book, we talk about the 13 golden pearls people need to live their life. And that's just an abridged story of what I went through and how I did that. But I also led the pack in cosmetic surgery until 2019 when I walked away just before the pandemic. And I was going to go around the world speaking about this book. But the world had a different idea. It shut down for 2 years. So what I did was I started a podcast called How to Live a Fantastic Life. It's now syndicated on the Apple network and has 7 million listeners a month. So, life has funny twists and turns. And even though I thought God wasn't listening, he was listening in his own way. So I'm doing other things now to bring people to that fantastic life that I know everyone can live.
So that's beautiful. But Mike, I have so many questions. So
Let's hit them. Let's hit them.
So I have so many.
Mary.
I have so many questions, but the first question is, what was it that kind of snapped you out of, being down, being depressed, and wanting to give back in the way that you just described? What was it? One or two things?
And we'll get that answer after a brief word from our commercial sponsors.
NASA is always working harder to be your carrier of choice. We offer insurance products that can help you meet your retirement goals, such as protecting your savings, securing lifetime income, or paying for healthcare costs. We're dedicated to providing best-in-class service and are keeping things simple, and we'll have your back. We have around 400,000 policyholders and contract holders and have been doing this for a long time, 170 years. But we remain humble enough to always try to improve. For more information, visit nfg.com. Nassau insurance products are issued by Nassau Life and Annuity Company of Hartford, Connecticut, Nassau Life Insurance Company, East Greenbush, New York, or Nassau Life Insurance Company of Kansas, Overland Park, Kansas. Subsidiaries of Nassau Financial Group. Products are not available in all areas. Policyholder counts are for all Nassau companies as of September 30th, 2022, and are subject to change.
Coverite is the first digital concierge health insurance platform focused on Medicare. Their mission is to make Medicare more transparent and accessible for America's 60 million Medicare beneficiaries. By simplifying a traditionally confusing and complex decision, Coverite delivers a simple, seamless, and hassle-free plan selection and enrollment experience. Try the Coverite platform and see for yourself why they've been referred to as the TurboTax for Medicare. Visit coverite.com/podcast to learn more.
Please share.
Well, I think when you're knocked down, you have a choice to stay down and stay on the tarmac, But it takes a choice to realize that there's a better life out there, that there really is a better life. You just have to open your eyes to it. And I think my eyes were opened by that. It really said to me, you've been doing a lot of great things in your life, but this isn't the end of your journey. It's the beginning of your journey. You are now going to do things in different ways. When I started this path, I said, I'm going to hopefully influence 7 million people with my views. And now it's 7 million people a month. So it really, life takes a twist and a turn, but you have to open your eyes and your heart to it. And it was Harriet that really opened my eyes to it. She said, look what we've been through. You really need to listen and pay attention. This is what it's all about.
So you have had an amazing career, and you talked about when you were a practicing physician and you were doing the cosmetic surgery and all of that. And so, it sounds like you were quite well known, recognized, and when you reached out to the physician in Colorado, you were like colleagues.
Yeah.
But let's be honest for a minute, in that, do you believe that your status in life helped you? Granted, you were very persistent. There's no doubt. I don't doubt that for a second. But there you are, this amazing doctor, getting in touch with this other amazing doctor. Like, talk a little bit about that. For example,
I think the thing that differentiates those that are really successful from those that aren't is persistence. I really think that is the number one trait. When I look back as a cosmetic doctor, I became an expert at everything I was bad at because I kept trying and learning new things. And I kept persisting in doing things that other people would not. So I became the leader in cosmetic surgery, not because I was brighter than anybody else, not because I was educated more than anybody else, but I was persistent more than anybody else. So I literally use that as my trait to define me. And that's what defined me throughout my life. So it's knowing what your traits are. And that's one of the traits that really defined me. Persistence, trying, helping, knowing these things. And also realizing that you can't do everything by yourself. You have to reach out to others. When a door closes, another one opens, but it always opens because somebody opens the door for you. It never opens because you open it yourself. You have to realize that something changes and that door opens by somebody else holding the door open for you.
it also sounds from what you've said that you have an amazing family. You talked about your wife. You talked.
Well, I have an amazing wife that's put up with
Yeah.
me for 43 years as of this year. We'll be married for 43 years as of May 23rd, and it's amazing that we get along so well and do things so well. I also have 4 amazing daughters that have always helped me and been amazing as well. I also have 8 amazing grandchildren. Now, when people ask,
Congratulations.
well, thank you.
That's
Everybody asks
amazing.
me what my greatest accomplishment, and as I said, my family. They are my greatest. Yes, I've written books. Yes, I've climbed mountains. Yes, I've been a great cosmetic doctor, but that means nothing compared to what my family is about. So I always revel in the fact that I have an amazing family.
How was that transformation, though, nonetheless, going from a cosmetic doctor to this author, this, super
Well, it's
successful
interesting. When I
podcaster,
was an
radio guy?
amazing doctor, I wrote 17 books. It wasn't that difficult to write on other things. So when I retired, so to speak, I wrote 3 best-selling books. So that was not a big transition. When I was a cosmetic doctor, I did a podcast for cosmetic surgeons on how to do cosmetic surgery. And it's being reborn right now, called The Beauty Show, because Apple has asked me to do that again because there's so much misinformation out there for beauty as well. So in addition to these things, I have, as you probably realize, a great face for radio.
No.
And so,
You're being too hard on yourself.
as I say, this golden voice helps a lot. And also being able to analyze things, put things very well. And I'm also able to interview people very well. When you're a cosmetic doctor, you got to find out everything from people in 5 minutes or less. And you have to be able to analyze things. I mean, your biggest decision you have to make is this person going to be good for cosmetic surgery or not? In other words, the no word is the most important word that you could ever offer to people. There are so many people that shouldn't get cosmetic surgery, or people who want to get cosmetic surgery for the wrong reasons. And that takes me back to a story where a woman came in, a young girl in her 20s came in and told me she wanted all these procedures done. And I looked at her and I said, no, there's something wrong with this picture. And she was in with her dad, and I said to her, "Do you really want to get better?" And she said, "Yes." I said, "Well, you need to see a psychiatrist. You don't need any of these things." And the father was overjoyed because he said, this girl has really gone off the deep end. She's really had some problems here. And you have saved her life. You have literally saved her life. If I went to see any other cosmetic doctor, it's likely they would have sold us all this stuff and done all this stuff. So that's what I think of all the time. I really had this in me as part of understanding what people are about. How did I transform? It really wasn't a transformation. It was an evolution. Evolution is what happened. I changed because I learned other things in life. I learned other things. And I'm really amazed by the sophist philosophy of it's not what happens to you, it's what you do with what happens. And that was really brought out by Epictetus 2,000 years before Christ. He came up with the sophist philosophy. Now, Epictetus was a Greek philosopher that was a slave, and he became a free man because of the things that he did. And that is what I think of all the time. It's not what happens to you, it's what you do with what happens. Remember that. Everybody remember that, because that truly is what determines people that are going to be successful from those that are not. Edison invented the light bulb, but he tried thousands of different times until he did. And all he said was, "Oh, I found something that didn't work. I found something that didn't work. I found something that didn't work," until finally lightning struck and he made the light bulb. Now, he probably did it all wrong because we're now into diodes and everything else in this day and age. And as I learn more, there's even better diodes than the ones that currently exist. But the point is, you have to keep trying. You got to keep evolving. And it's the one that closes their mind that doesn't evolve.
So you talked about a couple of things which I find interesting. You talked about being persistent. You talked about, try, keep trying. You gave a great analogy with Edison, one of my favorites, and Ben Franklin, another one. What other qualities, characteristics, you obviously have a positive mindset and you've always had that. And I think you framed it better. You said evolution versus I said transformation. But can you talk about a couple of other qualities
I think the
or
driving
characteristics?
force for me along the way has been hunger. I think it's inbred in firstborn children. I was a firstborn child. My father came from Czechoslovakia. My mother's family came from the Ukraine and homesteaded in Canada. And, that firstborn child sort of thing is the one that has to lead the pack. I decided I was going to early on wanted to go into medical school. No, my family was poor. We weren't born with a silver spoon in our mouths. And I remember once my cousin laughed at me when I said I was going to become a doctor. And he said, "How can you?" I said, "Just watch me." And so, I worked summers. I worked during after school. I put together enough money. I got loans and I became a doctor. Then when I became a doctor, I wanted to become a dermatologist. Now, dermatology is one of the hardest residencies to get into the world because it's so challenging to do well in that, because so many people are applying for this glorious thing. And when I was a doctor, I told one of my residents I was going to be a dermatologist. He laughed at me and said, "How can you become a dermatologist? I wanted to be a dermatologist for years." I said, "Just watch me." And I found that what dermatology schools wanted was people that could write. If you could write studies together and put experimental things together, that they'll choose you because they want somebody to help them. And so I became an author even before that. When I was a medical resident, I wrote maybe 20 papers. So it became easy when I applied to these schools. They looked at this and said, "Oh, this guy can help me because he'll do all the work that I need to get done."
So you've always been a writer. You've always been an author. I'm also interested to know, you're very confident and confident in a really great way.
Well, I'm confident because I'm probably a humble introvert. I would sooner read a book than I'd sooner get out in front of people. I put on my happy face here and my extrovert face today, but it's learning how to do that. So the answer is I can flip between an introvert and an extrovert. So
Right.
how come I'm confident? Because I read a lot. I've read a book a week for 30 years. And I keep learning new things and doing things. It's easy to step on the shoulder, to be successful if you step on the shoulders of giants. And all the knowledge is out there in books. So you just have to read and read and read. You have to put yourself out there and learn. And you have to never stop learning. Pete Carroll, the coach for the Seattle Seahawks, just stepped down from being coach after a year that was subpar for him. He only won 9 times and lost 7 times and didn't make the playoffs. So he decided it was time to move on. But his whole thing was learning all the time. And he empowered people by that learning. He empowered people to do the best they can. And that's what I hope to do today, is to empower people to get off the couch, get off eating their Cheetos, and do something today with their lives. Do something like Amanda did to Harriet and say, get out there and do something with your life. Get out there and make your life important. Don't just sit back and let it happen to you.
So, Dr. Lycka, before I do have a final question, but I'm going to pause that for just a moment. Baby steps. So, for individuals listening to this and saying, oh, that sounds so great, this is so inspirational, but what are a couple of baby steps?
That's easy.
People can.
Now, an ad from one of our sponsors. Remember when you could trust the news? Well, then check out Walter. Walter is the free, no-nonsense newsletter for grown-ups that comes to your inbox 3 times a week. From current trends, aging in place, travel, retirement, and everything in between, including a dash of pop culture trivia and throwbacks, Walter is a great way to start your mornings and to stay informed. Oh, and did we mention that it's free? Check us out at thisiswalter.com. Get smart. Get Walter.
Canfield says, do 3 things a day towards your goal. Figure out what your goal is, figure out what your purpose in life is, and you will do that. In my book, in one of the chapters, I talk about ikigai. And ikigai is the Japanese concept of purpose. And what you have to do is figure out what your purpose in life. Now, how do you do that? Well, there's 4 overlapping circles. One is what you want to do. Another thing is what you're good at. Last one is what the world needs. And finally, there's what you can get paid for. And the overlap of that is ikigai. So if you figure out what your ikigai is, then all you have to do is 3 things towards it. Now, I know I'm simplifying this, and it's going to be hard for everybody. But you don't have to do your ikigai as the one and all thing. You can do a part-time ikigai until you figure it out. And then you can do another part-time ikigai until you figure it out. And then just do 3 baby steps toward it each and every day. Now, at the end of a month, 3 things a day is 90 things. At the end of 10 months, that's 300 things. So if you take those 300 steps, guess how far you are along the path to make it happen? Now, that's not hard. 3 things a day? Oh my goodness. Turn off the TV for 20 minutes. Turn off your iPhone for 20 minutes. I mean, the average person spends 2 hours a day on their iPhone. The average person spends another 2 hours a day watching sports. And the average person watches, 2 hours a day watching TV. Turn off the news. It's all bad news anyhow. It's all the stuff that happened yesterday. It's not the things that's going to happen tomorrow. And get free. get away from these things. Those are the things that are so important. I'm not a big fan of social media. I'm on social media because I have to be. But I think social media is an evil for a lot of people because the people spend all their time on it, looking and clicking, doing all these things. And people are often addicted to these things. It's not a good thing.
No, I
Determine
agree.
little steps.
Yeah, no, I agree. So we're coming down to our close, and we always ask our guests, and you've shared a little bit about this, but I'm going to ask you anyway. So you can do anything you want every day. And why do you get up every day and choose to do what you're doing right now? What's your why?
Let me tell you, that's an easy one. A friend of mine, Eric Rain, put it together very easily. He took a marble out of his pocket and said, think of this marble as a perfect day. How many perfect days do you have in your life? How many fantastic days do you have in your life? And I said, well, maybe one a month. He said, well, what if you took every day and made it fantastic? What if you made every day a fantastic day? How many days would be fantastic? Well, I said, I'll take Sunday off, so it'll just make 25 days a month. And he said, okay, let's do that. He said, now picture this. He said, make 25 days a month fantastic. Make them as perfect as they can. Change your mindset to the little things that go on and look for the good things that go on. And so that's what I've done. I've really changed my mindset because, Mary, this year I'm going to be 68. The average male lives until they're 87 or 88. So that's just the average. And, I'll probably exceed that. But the point is, I want to make every day in that next 20 years fantastic. And I challenge everybody to do that. I challenge everybody to make that fantastic. And what I've done is I put together a little questionnaire for people called the lifequalityassessment.com. Life Quality Assessment. Go there. There's 25 short questions that'll show you exactly where you are to that fantastic life. And there's a manual that'll take you to the next step. So that's what I challenge you to do. I also challenge your audience to do something for somebody else today they would not regularly do. Do something that'll make fantastic for everybody. If you're going through a drive-through to buy a coffee, buy the next person in line a coffee. You'll probably make a chain reaction that'll change their life and their world as a result of it. If your neighbor needs a hand, give them a hand. How many people go over to their neighbor with some cookies or something just to say, hey, here's something for you? I live in the frozen north. If you have the ability, shovel their sidewalk. If you have the ability to do something for them. Say hi to your neighbor. Just pass a good word on. If you're in the grocery store in a line, say hi to the person in front of you or behind you. You don't know what they're going through. You don't know what their life is. Make the world a better place. Pay it forward because the world needs that right now. 2024 could be the best year of everybody's life, or it could be the worst year of your life. It all depends how you look at it. What do you want it to be?
Well said. And I agree with you. And I also challenge myself most days and even most weeks to look up and say hello to people I don't know. Sometimes people look at you like you have 5 eyeballs, and other times people smile and they say hi. And I'm sure, like you said, you don't know what people are going through. So as we come to a close, we will put all of your links in our show notes, Dr. Lycka, but what's the best way individuals can get a hold of you if they'd like to learn more about you or your book or your speaking engagements or any of those sorts?
Get in touch with my personal assistant, Tammy, Tami, at Lycka.ca. She will help you get organized. She's one of the 7 wonders of the world that literally makes my life happen. I'm busy. I do a lot of things. As I say, I don't hang out on social media a lot, even though I have a presence there, even though I do a lot with that. If you really want to get my attention, if you want some help with something, get in touch with Tammy. I think life is too short to not take advantage of the opportunities that you have. We offer coaching. We offer other things for people. We offer, get my book, The Secrets to Living a Fantastic Life. It's available on Amazon. Find out more about what I have to offer, because there's a lot to do that. I have a podcast called How to Live a Fantastic Life that is out there for everybody. Look me up on Apple. Do things. Make your life better. Do those baby steps to make it better. Get off the couch.
Thank you so much, Dr. Lycka, for joining me today. It's been a pleasure. You've been very inspirational, and I am definitely taking in everything you've said, and I'm going to apply it, and I hope others do as well. Again, thank you for joining us. Please give us feedback, like us, follow us, and we look forward to seeing all of you again and hearing all of you again on our next episode of the Prime Life Podcast. Thanks so much, and have a great day.
Remember to subscribe to the Prime Life Podcast anywhere you find podcasts. You can find all of our episodes, contact information, and more on our website, primelifepodcast.com. Stay connected with us. Follow us on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok.